Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Forbes contributor Sam Adebayo. Sam, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to speak with you, especially about this topic of conversation, which is DeepSeek, a Chinese artificial intelligence company, which has rattled the markets over the past week and has seemingly dominated and completely changed the international AI landscape. So, to start the conversation, what is DeepSeek?
DeepSeek is a Chinese company that was founded in 2023 by Liang Wenfeng. And DeepSeek um, essentially develops AI models across several domains. DeepSeek R1 was launched like 5 days ago, but that wasn't the first AI model actually that they launched. They have like a number of LLMs. There's the DeepSeek RO. There's the DeepSeek V-Base, which is like the large language model with a lot of billions of parameters of data. So essentially, DeepSeek is the company behind, the DeepSeek R1 that sort of like shook the internet space for a number of days.
And so, what about this specific model, DeepSeek R1, that has really caught international attention?
I think the biggest one is the matter of the cost. When you look at how much was put into, allegedly, I would say, because there are a lot of arguments on both sides of the divide. Because when you think about the model, it wasn't just that it was trained from a vacuum. It was actually trained based on some foundational models, right? Open source foundational models. And so the talk about the cost is still alleged, but that's like the one of the big major points of discussion when you talk about the model. It was supposedly built for about $5.7 million, sorry, as opposed to OpenAI that has spent billions and billions of dollars. I think that was one of the major flashpoints of the conversation. But another flashpoint was the intensifying rivalry between the US and China for global AI dominance. And so those were like the two flashpoints, particularly when the model was launched.
And that's a conversation I had last week with one of my Forbes colleagues about the AI space race, essentially between the US and China. And in your story for Forbes, you argue this isn't so much about that space race, but how much do those geopolitical concerns really are at play here?
I would like to say there is obviously a lot of geopolitical tension that is building up. And my article wasn't to say that is not a layer to consider or that the tension isn't worthy of conversation. But my article was to argue that, yeah, there's a lot of tension. There's always been that AI. That technological race between the U.S. and China. This is not the first time we're seeing something of the sorts. My article was to argue that, hey, well, I think we're missing the bigger picture here, which is really about open AI, open source and closed source AI models, right? And I think we're tending towards a future that's going to be shaped more and more by these open source AI models. So, of course, there's geopolitical tension. There is, the rivalry. There's a lot to talk about in that regard. But I think a major picture to look at is how open source AI is really going to shape the future of AI.
And that just perfectly goes to my next question because I quote your article here and you say this: the real story is about the growing power of open source AI and how it's upending the traditional dominance of closed source models. So, first, lay the groundwork for us. Just can you define what open source is versus closed source?
Open source, basically, just from the name, means that it's open in the sense that you can go into the model, or into the technology and use the technology or modify it to suit your purposes. So, say for instance, you're like in the healthcare space, you can go into an open source technology, maybe a large language model like GPT, for instance, which was created by Microsoft, I think, in 2023 or last year for companies in the biomedical space, right? If you're a healthcare company, you're a major player in that space, you can go into that model and fine tune that model, right, to suit your specific purposes. So the basic thing about open models or open source technologies that they are open. You can go into them, modify them, and use them, as opposed to closed source where you cannot go into the technology to use it for specific purposes.
And so DeepSeek R1 is open sourced. So if I'm a company, why would I want to have my AI model be open sourced versus closed source? What are the pros and cons here?
Um, of course, open source technology, and I'm deliberately using the word technology because this is not the first time we're seeing open source technology. I'd like to take us a little bit back into like 10, 11 years ago. We had Kubernetes, which is like a open source container for um, applications in the cloud, right? When the cloud era was just really coming of age, and what happened with Kubernetes, which is now almost like an industry standard, is that it helps developers to deploy applications more rapidly and more securely, right? So open source technology, um, and like I said, I'm deliberately using the word technology, fosters innovation in that now a lot of people can share ideas together within a community. If you're like your technology, there are issues maybe with the code or the model. There, somebody from the open source community could actually go into that technology and sort of like modify it or correct like some sort of an anomaly within the model. So the biggest, I think, the four biggest or the strongest advantages for open source is that it encourages collaboration. It also helps to accelerate innovation, right? Because now we are together in a community, we're sharing knowledge together, and then we're accelerating innovation. And then it democratizes, sorry, knowledge, right? Because now we're not behind a closed door and keeping our proprietary technology to ourselves, but we're sharing with the world and democratizing that knowledge. And that's how really technology progresses or advances, right? Technology does not progress without sharing information. So those are like the biggest advantages of open source. Sure enough, there is the concern with security. People can go into open source AI models and misuse those models or inject malicious components into those models and cause those models to hallucinate or fabricate outcomes that are false outrightly. But I think that the pros outweigh the cons, because if we have a technology here that is open and more people can use this technology and they can help advance the course of technology, I think that's better for all of us as human beings.
And this is really interesting because DeepSeek's latest model, the R1, is open sourced. Compared to its competitors, it was cheaper. As you said, it was only made less than $6 million. It works. It is a competitor to the models out there that cost a lot more money. And it's effective. So what do you think this does to the entire AI landscape?
Again, let's go back to the issue of cost. I do think that DeepSeek needs to tell us a lot more about how much went into actually building that model. Because when you're building a model, you need to talk about the cost that went into the pre-trained models, right? Upon which this new model was, supervised, was fine-tuned rather, right? So there's a lot of arguments about what was the actual cost of developing this model, right? But obviously it's as efficient, if not more efficient, and there was less that was used in the training of this model. So that sort of like shifts the landscape a little bit, because now people are asking, if we can do this at half a fraction of the cost, why should we be using these other models, these other big models, right? But that is not to say that the quest for bigger and bigger models is going to stop at any time soon, because there's something called the scaling law, or the scaling AI law, and that essentially says that the bigger the model or the bigger the models, the better the results can be. Because, essentially AI models are like a large, data repository, a large repository of data parameters, right? And the larger the repository is, the better the results can be. The better the chances of fine tuning these data sets to give us the best results that we can get. So I think this definitely shifts the landscape, in that people are going to be more about using the proprietary data that they sit on in their organizations, and using that data um, within these larger data sets, and fine tuning that data to really address whatever business use cases they may want to address, right? And it's also going to lead it to a price, right? Because now you're going to, I mean, why should I go use OpenAI at $100 tier when I can just use DeepSeek R1 that is open source and basically free? Of course, there are many other concerns like privacy, and whether, there is censorship as well, because if you're using DeepSeek R1, and I've used that, and I've tried this myself, there are like certain outcomes that you're not going to get if you're asking certain things that criticize China in a way. So there's that conversation about censorship as well. But this definitely shifts the landscape. I think more and more going forward, we're going to see a drop in the prices, but I don't think we're going to necessarily see um, big model companies stopping the quest for building bigger models.
What do you think this means for the future of just an everyday AI user? Because we're talking about pretty much, we're touching on every issue that AI faces, like the geopolitical tensions, like prices, and you're talking about a potential price war here, open source versus closed source. But let's say you're just the typical everyday user of AI. What does this do for you?
I think what we're going to see, I think we're already seeing, we're going to see a very, very strong, like we're going to see a litany of AI products, like a very long list. And so more and more consumers are going to have a long list of options to choose from. But consumers also have to be careful about the sort of models that they interact with, because some of these models may or may not be safe to use, right? But I think it's going to become easier more and more for consumers, at the end user side, to use AI models more freely, more cheaply, and it's going to be more accessible. So the future is going to be one that is going to have like AI tools or applications, all these models permeating the space, right? So there's going to be more and more, a lot of options to choose from. Just the other day after um, um, R1 was released, I saw another thing about QN saying that Alibaba's QN saying that their model could actually outperform DeepSeek R1, right? So we're going to have those. And so I think this tension, there is sort of race for innovation. At the end of the day, will pan out to be for the good of the consumers, because now we're going to have more options to choose from, and it's just going to become more and more accessible.
I know you brought up those concerns about privacy, about security, but also you think, hey, the pros outweigh the cons here. This just really helps with innovation. Do you think the future of AI, because of this open source model that really has jumped onto the scene, we're going to be seeing this a rapid advancement of AI?
I think so. I think so. Because I saw Sam Altman's tweet where he talked about they're gonna stay put with their strategy at OpenAI and gonna just continue to build out. And I think that's a very great thing. But I don't think that Sam Altman is also sitting on his back. And I think we're gonna see more and more. Because it's a race, right? We're going to see more and more attempts from all of these companies to try to outperform the other one. And what that's going to lead to is going to be the acceleration of AI innovation, more than ever before. Of course, there's also the talk about AGI. I don't think we're anywhere close to artificial general intelligence, but I think this sort of acceleration will do better for the industry as a whole. And we're going to see more efficient models that are super fast, and also cheaper to use.
Well, it seems like a very exciting time in the AI industry. And as these conversations continue, I hope you come back on and break it down with me. Sam, thanks so much for joining me.
Looking forward. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.